Isaac Lamba is currently the ambassador of Malawi to Germany. He initially did his MA degree in history. He then followed that with a PhD degree also in history at the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. He also has a certificate in conflict resolution from Columbia University in New York. So we actually have two things in common, Ambassador. I also was a history major in college, and I also studied at Columbia. So two other special bonds that I had forgotten about, actually, from last time we met. He also served for about 25 years as a professor at the West of Malawi University. He also served as the Director General of the university. He's been in the Foreign Service for also quite a while and has had a number of very interesting postings around the world. Again, some of the highlights. He served as Deputy Ambassador to France as well as to UNESCO in Paris. He also served as the Consulate General in South Africa. He also served as the Ambassador to the United Nations in New York. Currently, as I said, he is the ambassador to Germany, as well as 23 other countries that he's technically responsible for in Europe, including also Turkey. So in many ways, I think we can really benefit from his rich experience academically, as well as diplomatically. And we're very happy to have you here. So if you could please join me in a very, very warm welcome for Professor Ambassador Isaac Lamba. Thank you.
Good. Oops. That's okay. Right, good. No, that's fine. I'll just put it here. Yeah, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Is it morning or afternoon? Thank you very much for the correction. Let me just make one small correction to the introduction. I was actually Director General Permanent Secretary for Education in my country for about 3 years. So that's all I can say. Let me start by introducing two things. One is development, economic development. The other one is relationship between economic development and improvement of life. Now, these are issues I may not have discussed in my write-up. I did, however, think of them each time I moved from step to step. Now, the title of this presentation is Challenges of Economic Development in the 21st Century. I thought it is all quite good to talk about development in general terms, but it is even better to relate it to a particular country, and I would not think of any easier country to relate it to than my own country, Malawi, in southern Africa, a small country. We will be talking, therefore, around Malawi about this. But before moving further than this, what is it that we call economic development? Well, I know that I am a layman, and some of you people here are definitely very well-versed economists. But my layman's consideration of this makes me think that it is really a process and policies within that process by which a nation improves the economic, political, and social well-being of its people. So that when you talk of economic development, you're talking of the apex of what should be the good life that we all yearn for in this world. Now, there are economic development indicators. I don't want to mess up this. How do you... It's possible to... Yeah, okay, that's right. Yeah. Is it refusing? Yeah.
Here we go. So this is one.
You have your magic. Yeah. I still see, yeah, I think, yeah. Economic indicators. In this one, I thought that, just like some of the economists here present will agree, we should be talking about economic growth. Now, what is economic growth? We'll not go into details of this, but I think the economists talk about GDP and GNI, that's gross national income per capita. Now, this is what will show that a country is doing well this year, is doing better next year, or did better last year, because this will always yo-yo depending on the performance of the whole economy. Now, when we talk of this one, we must remember that, as I said, we are talking about good life. And good life means you have the various needs and requirements around you met. And we are talking about the social situation in any environment you are in. How good is it? How can you cope? Are you coping well with the social environment? And you're talking about, as I show there, poverty reduction. The poverty must reduce if you are going to talk of a positive economic, a positive development indicator. There are always problems of income inequalities. To what extent can this particular scourge be reduced? Now, I don't want to sound like a socialist, but it is true that today one of our problems in the world is income inequalities. Even a country which claims to be poor, you can be sure that there is a group of people there that enjoy heavenly life. A lot of money around them. When someone is sleeping on the streets without food, those are the inequalities which show that there is something wrong, an indicator that there is something wrong in the economic situation of that country. Then you have education levels. That's another indicator. To what extent are we making available the necessary education for the development of our countries or of our people? Then there is sustainable growth, population growth, for example, then rural-urban migration, environmental degradation. All these are actually indicators that should tell you a story where you are and what you should be doing if you have not done it already, or how you can pat yourself on the back if the indicators are showing a positive trend. Then there must be peace and stability. Sometimes we talk about peace and stability as something, you expect in society. Some people call it the normal characteristic of a good society. It is true. But how do you attain that? Sometimes we can be a little too idealistic about this, because When you talk about peace and stability, you talk about other factors, other indicators being present. There will be food. There will be less inequalities in economic distribution, and so forth. Well, you must have, in recent times, witnessed what has been going on around the world, outside Wall Street in America and other countries, people demonstrating against inequalities. And this is what can bring what should I call it? A destabilized environment in the community. So that is something which should rank as an important indicator about it is the temperature, as it were, of how well we're doing in our economy. Then, of course, there are governance issues. There are major challenges in African economic development, and that is what I would like to come to. I would like to come to this one because we are all engaged in Africa, and I think other developing countries in the world. We are all engaged to see how we can grapple with these challenges and improve ourselves into that kind of category where we can talk about genuine economic development. In my summary, which you can see on the screen there, I have said that one of the challenges that we're facing today in Africa, indeed in Malawi, is alleviation of poverty. The poverty levels must come down. At the moment, so many countries are still far from the United Nations. It's now gone, it used to be $1 a day kind of situation. Now it's, I think, $2. Everybody must at least have around him what it takes to buy with $2. Now, many countries are far from that. And it's a question of how can we get to that point where everybody will have $2 in their pockets. Because once we get to there, then we are alleviating poverty. The definition of poverty in that environment will have changed considerably to take into account the fact that nobody is going to bed without food. Nobody is going to on the street without cleaning up themselves, the body with soap and a few things. Nobody is going semi-naked on the street. This is one of the most important challenges that we have, because even budgets today for international support must reflect what they call a pro-poor element. In my budget, in my country's budget, we talk about it as a pro-poor budget. Now, it's a question of to what extent has that poverty been taken into account. The second one is what I already mentioned. It's a big challenge, income inequality. This is a very difficult one. And it's a question of what incentives and what strategies can we put in place to engage everybody. In America, America is very developed. It's probably the most developed country on earth, as they say. And you would think everybody is doing very well. But you see, the inequalities of income in America are horrendous. I was very surprised myself when I was based in New York to find people sleeping under bridges. And I said, we don't have this in Malawi. We are very poor, but this is not what we have. But you see, this is just a manifestation of these inequalities that must be addressed. We do have these in our countries, in Africa and everywhere, and indeed in Malawi. Education is one of the important areas that need to be examined. How well are we doing in education? The literacy rate. Now, in Malawi, it's just over 50 now, and that's not good enough. In other countries, I was in Bulgaria, in Croatia earlier this week, and the rate of literacy there, or the literacy rate, is about 98 point something. Now, I wasn't quite sure myself when we, as developing countries, can get to that level, which is probably the ultimate in our situation. Then you have improvement of health quality. This is important because, you know, you cannot develop economically without good health. You need to make sure that you are addressing this issue. A healthy nation, a wealthy nation is a healthy nation. That's what they say. We need to address various scourges in our situations, and I think I've indicated there. Oh my goodness. Did I lose it? Oh, where are the technicians? I beg your pardon. Someone should have shouted at me to say you are talking to the gods. Yeah. Improving health quality, prevention of diseases such as HIV/AIDS, malaria, and so forth. Now, in Malawi, HIV/AIDS has reduced considerably. It used to be 15% of the population. I'll come to that one not too long from now. It's now at 12%. And that's a big, big improvement because of various interventions, local as well as international. Then there must be land reforms to address. It's a big challenge. You've heard of various problems arising from this. You've heard of problems in Zimbabwe. I think that's a classic case where everybody thinks, oh, land. But land is the characterization of our life and livelihood. Therefore, everything to do with land must take into account the fact that people must have access to land. That land will lead to their livelihood. We are agricultural, basically agricultural in Malawi. If you don't have land, you are in serious trouble. Right now, we are self-sufficient in food. And this food is not produced by big estate owners. No. It's produced by the local people, the smallholder farmers. And why? Because almost everybody has a piece of land they can work on. So this is very, very important indeed. The next one is women empowerment. Well, I don't want to, I would not want to spend too much time on this because everybody knows how important this is. For a long time, we have laid aside a very important resource in development, and that's women. In my country, I can say that 70% of production is by women. And we have said, no, I will have a wife here. We know we're doing well in our garden, but most of the doing well actually belongs to her. Finally, I come forward and say, this is what I produced. And go to the markets to get cash out of what we have produced. I will be in charge of that cash. And my wife will be the servile beggar for money she made. Now, this is not what we need to have in the world today. We have gone a long way, and I think we are making a lot of progress in this. But it is still a challenge in many countries. Some people use religion to defend their atavistic attitudes and their actions against women. Now, that is something we need to get away from because we are all created equal in the sight of God. Someone will say, no, the woman came from my rib. That would be a man. And you say, how did you know that she came from your rib? Actually, you are adopting a system or a pattern of thought that closes out what should have been benefiting you in improving your own economic situation. The next one is access to world markets. Now, we are producers. We are an agricultural country. But for us to improve, we need markets for our products. Right now, people are producing a lot of soya in my country. And so many farmers have found themselves with these piles of soya beans, which cannot go to the markets. Now, this is an area which we must engage ourselves in. I know that the international community will always come up with suggestions, but we need access to WTO, the international markets, even in Germany. I've always talked here that Germany must open up the markets to us, because that's the only way. And this is a matter which is receiving a lot of attention at the moment. The other one is corruption. Oh my goodness. It's not just an African problem. It's everywhere. Oh yes, even in Europe. You find it everywhere. And this is a big, big problem to our economic development because it does not do a nation any good. It destroys the finances of the nation, the economy of the nation. It may profit one person, but even that one person is not comfortable the way he uses his money obtained out of corruption, because he knows that one day the law will catch up with them and something will happen. I don't want to talk much about that. There are so many big personalities today that we can float around who are finding themselves in hot soup because of corruption. As I said earlier on, there is the issue of governance. We have to get rid of dictatorships. We're doing quite well in Africa today, but we still have to do better. Because what we have acquired and gained out of a democratic plank sometimes descends into dictatorship. Once they see, the situation is set, I am in power, and everybody voted for me, instead of being conscious that I am accountable to these people, I will sit here and start moving my own way, exploiting the same people who put me in power. And that kind of governance is usually characterized by centralization of authority. Now we are saying here that any democratic dispensation must ensure that there is decentralization of governance, and we have local government and things like that. Now let me take you to Malawi. You can see that map on the screen. I'm not going to go into details. It's a small country. Close to 1/3 of it is water, a lake, very good for tourists, and of course food, fish. There is the African map, the map of Africa on the side, and you can see a dot there called Malawi. We are about, in fact, this is a little, exaggerated. The population is not 15.4. It's about, it's going to 14 now. But it's not a big country. The total land mass is only 480 square kilometers. We have, as I said earlier on, we have a country that is basically agricultural. The economy gets 32% contribution from agriculture. That's the GDP. And agriculture employs 80% of the labor force in our country. The GDP above 7.6%. We've enjoyed that one for quite some time, but now it is going to go down to about 6.7, according to the latest, figures that I've seen. GDP per capita, 343, according to World Bank indicators. And life expectancy, as I said, it's just above 54. I'm above 50, it's 54.2. We must come back to the issue of development. How can we develop Malawi? We have said it is an agricultural country. But you see, we must go beyond agriculture and diversify. And this is one of our major challenges. As you can see there, the agriculture comes on top. But there is mining. We have some mining resources which could be exploited by investors. And we are right now engaged in inviting investors to Malawi to come and mine some of our precious metals. Right now, Australians are mining uranium, but there is also gold. Don't worry about uranium. It's for peaceful purposes. We are a member of IAEA in Vienna. In order to diversify our economic performance and our economic activities, the mining part must come in. But in order for that mining to move in tandem with other areas of development, We need electricity, gas, and so forth. So there is room for improvement of energy. Right now, energy is a big challenge in most of African countries. I've read about Nigeria. It's a huge challenge. I've read about, of course, my own country. It is a challenge. Tanzania, it is a challenge. You have hours where you don't have electricity, just like in my country. And this is an area which needs to be addressed, and addressed very, very quickly. Without energy, the issue of construction hinders its contribution to development. Now, Malawi is engaged in trade. For trade to move, we need investments. Now, we are an agricultural country. I'll tell you that we produce coffee, tea, sugar, tobacco. That one is going down now. Tobacco, purses, and a few other things. Now, these have to find a market somewhere first. But these, for that market to be lucrative to us, we must process these products. So we are talking of agro-processing. Now, these agro-processed products are actually good on the spot as well as abroad, and that is how money will be, will come in and assist us to develop the country even more. Now, if you can look at that diagram, the composition of Malawi's GDP is 37% no. Wait a minute. Well, you can interpret it there. There is a key. 8% financial and insurance services, and 5% real estate activities. Mining is there. But all this must be properly coordinated, and this is a big challenge. Properly coordinated economic activities for these activities to benefit the economy of the country as a whole. We are not talking about one person alone benefiting from this. We're talking about the nation benefiting from this. Now, I don't want to, I'll move on to the next one. Yeah. Now, how do you do this? I said there must be coordination. What Malawi has done in its own right is to come up with what is called the Malawi Growth and Development Strategy. Now, this is a document produced by government. Now, it's nothing to do with centrally planned economy. No. It is something which has come about after consultations with everybody in the villages, in towns, those engaged in commerce, agriculture, and so forth. And this one is a document which ensures that all various activities in the country are actually plugged to this overarching document. I've called it overarching there. I've said the overarching objective of the MGDS is to reduce poverty through sustained economic growth and infrastructure development. So all these things must come in to form a whole, and that is what is called the development strategy that we have. This particular strategy is not completely outside what is known, because we spent time to try and make it adaptable to what you have as the the United Nations Millennium Development Goals. We are all engaged in this. I think how many are there? Are they 7 or 8? There are 8. We are likely to achieve 5 of the 8 development goals, the United Nations development goals. And this is obviously good news to us. Now, the thrust of the MGDS is to create wealth through sustainable economic growth, as I said. But the problem is how to find the means to, for example, improve our infrastructure. Now, our infrastructure, like everywhere else, our infrastructure is extremely important Because we as a basically rural a basically rural population, you can be sure that so much is produced in the rural countries, rural areas. Now, in Malawi, this is something which is peculiar, I suppose, to other countries. Our population as rural is 82% engaged in rural agriculture and so forth. The urban population is only about 18% or so. Now, this is a challenge, because if these people are engaged in production in the rural areas, they must find infrastructure, they must have infrastructure, road infrastructure and so forth, to take the produce to urban areas, to feed the urban populations. So this is one area which we have endeavored to spend time on. Now, we have in the MGDS, the Malawi Growth and Development Strategy, 9 priority areas. We're talking of agriculture. If we grow enough food for ourselves, which we are doing, to create food security, that's all fine. But we need to ensure that that food is not wasted. That food is processed somehow, somewhere. And of course, it's not just the food that we grow. And all other products are processed. So there is what I earlier mentioned as the agro-processing that we need to cope with the production, which is quite heavy production on the land. I'll go to science, education, science, and technology, and or maybe I shouldn't. I should remember to mention water development. This is, as you can see there, a very important element of our development strategy. Now, we have the lake, we have rivers. It's a question of how we use or utilize these gifts from God, or this gift from God. So we are engaged all the time in the strategization related to the use of this water, and ensure that we do not waste water unnecessarily. Education, science, and technology, that's straightforward. We need that one. Malawi is doing quite well. We have about 3 universities, public universities, and 4 private universities. And we are aware of the fact that these universities are going to produce educated people who must find jobs. So in our own way, we have retilted the curricula to ensure that there is an element in there which creates self-reliance. After the degree, you can go and get something going for yourself. You don't have to wait for someone to employ you, as it were, from day one to the end of your life. I remember Bill Clinton, a former US president, once said, well, we are employed to prepare ourselves to get away from that web and cobweb in order for us to employ others. But to have skills is an area which universities must endeavor to handle, and handle properly. And I'm saying properly because the skills must be relevant to the environment where we are. Transport, I've already said something about that. Climate change, well, that's the current discussion. Integrated rural development, I thought I should say something about this. Malawi believes that the population in the villages must remain where it is. But for it to remain where it is and not strain the cities, that's a rural-urban migration. For it to remain where it is, there must be facilities given to it, basic facilities, like roads, as I mentioned, hospitals, schools, postal services in the rural areas, public transport to the rural areas, and all these things. If you have those markets too, the primary market, if you have those, the rural community will be stabilized and stay in the rural areas. They will be the major supplier of food to the, of course, to the cities, as you would expect. Now, this is what we have called integrated rural development to enhance economic development. rural development where several players come together. Ministry of Health, Ministry of Education, Ministry of communication, and so forth and so forth. They come together, put together resources that will create an environment which will hold the rural populations in the rural areas. Health, sanitation, HIV/AIDS, we have alluded to that, and energy, we've alluded to that. So this is what we have called the Malawi Growth and Development Strategy. As I said, our development in the developing countries sometimes is mismanaged because of lack of proper planning. The planning stage is important because if you plan wrongly, that's it. You've missed it. Millennium Development Goals. How has Malawi done? Well, the first one is eradicating extreme poverty and hunger. Now, this one, we are likely to meet this particular one. Of course, hunger, we have met it, I would say. We no longer have hunger in Malawi. We are exporting food. The second one is achieve universal primary education. We may not meet this one because it goes with population growth. If your population is growing faster than economic growth, then there is a problem. And we are saying that we may not come to achieve the proper results of universal primary education. We have universal primary education, but to me, what matters is the quality of that education. Are we giving the kids the right thing, or are they learning under trees? Do they have classrooms? Do they have teachers? How many teachers have we trained for so many kids? When we came back to multi-party democracy in 1994, there were 1.2 million kids in primary school. A few years later, when we introduced universal primary education, that figure moved up to 3.5 million within a short while because we had to move fast. That was quite a crisis because you needed school buildings, you needed teachers, you needed materials, teaching and learning materials. And all these had to be handled at one go. It was not an easy one. And I don't think we have reached perfection on that. But it is a very important one which we are striving to achieve. Now, gender equality. We're doing what we can, but we still have a lot to do because even in Parliament, there are only, I think, the population. I mean, it's only about 8% of 193 members of Parliament that are women. Now, that's not good enough. In Rwanda, Rwanda has done very well. I think there are more women in Parliament than men. And Burundi is moving in that same direction. And this is what we should be yearning to achieve as a part of the development strategy. Child mortality reduction, yes, we've done quite a bit of that one in Malawi. And I'll not want to say more than what is shown there, achievements through implementation of the MGDS and MDGs. Food population living below poverty line from 50 to 39%. Food security improved, as I said. Then the country is moving from rain-fed agriculture to irrigation schemes just to enhance the food production. Primary school net enrollment increased 73% to 83%. It has problems. I don't want to hide that. And HIV prevalence rates declined from 14 to 12%. In 2010, and provision of cash transfer to over 34,000 orphans. These are mostly orphans as a result of HIV/AIDS. There is that particular facility to transfer cash from a source to those people who are looking after these orphans. That one has been doing miracles, and I think we are going to continue. There is indicated there, child-headed households mostly. The mining sector has done quite well, and I think that we are at that point where we would like to talk about mining as one of the most critical, should I say, causes of development or critical drivers of development, of our economic development. I think at this point, since we've been showing it on the screen, I believe we've shown enough on the screen and not got lost by those wonderful visitors who appeared there. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Chairman, for this.